if you look at your organic traffic between January and now, on average, companies have lost about 60% of all their organic traffic. It's gone down. How is it possible that you can produce results that are so uncommon in the industry? Like, what actually is it about you and what you do?
Charles, so you work with 7, 8 figure founders and business owners. And one of the things you help them with is to escape the founder's trap. What is the founder's trap?
So, great question. Um, it ultimately comes down to everything very dependent on the founder. Like when you think about an org chart, most of us envision the CEO at the top, and then it branches down to the people that report to the CEO, and then it branches down a little bit further to the people that report to those managers and so forth. And that's kind of what we envision. But the reality is, for most small businesses, both 6, 7, and even some 8 figure companies, it's really the founder in the middle. And then all marketing depends on their word of mouth and referrals. All sales depends on their ability to close the deals. Operations all depend on them. Client deliverability all depends on their sign off. So, really, for small businesses, the org chart is really just them in the middle of everything. And so if you pull the founder out of the middle of that org chart, the company begins to collapse. One of the fascinating things about the founder's trap, though, is that you actually fall into the founder's trap because you're successful. So there's two real hard points of growing a business. The first one is when you start the business. And we all know about that. But it's never really talked about the second hard point. And that's when you've built your business through hard work, word of mouth, and referrals. And then it hits people differently. Some people, they start to hit it around like 750,000. Other times they might hit it all the way up to 3 million, but they just go into this trap where everything is so dependent on them. But then the harder they work and the more successful they become, the deeper and deeper and deeper they fall into the trap. And it's harder and harder to get out because more and more is dependent on them. So then that's the founder's trap. You get out of that founder's trap and you get this inflection point that takes companies over to that next level. And that's when things get, even more exciting.
So you know what my next question is going to be. How do you get them out of the founder's trap, right?
It's good. It's good. Um, we find that there's 3 main traps that founders tend to fall in. The first trap is what we call the setup trap. And that means that marketing is all dependent on word of mouth and referrals. So it's really about creating scalable marketing and scalable marketing strategies that just doesn't depend on the founder's personal network or just trying to get out there and do what they can to drive up as much business as they possibly can. So that would really be looking at that trap. The next one is the sales trap. And that sales trap is when everything is based on founder-led sales. Now that happens for a number of different reasons, but for one, it's just the founders, they know so much about their business, and they tend to sell a lot of complex custom type solutions that can keep them in the sales trap. The other thing is that they never really develop a sales playbook, so that they may have spent months or years figuring out how to sell this, and then they go on LinkedIn, they try to hire somebody with sales experience and put them in the seat, and it never really works out because it took them a while to figure out how to sell it. They need to be able to transfer that knowledge over to the person in sales. So it's creating that sales solution. And then the other one is the scale trap. And that means where everything is sort of just based on guesswork. In other words, they don't know if they have the right people in the right seat. People don't have the right KPIs in place. So they don't even have their North Star. They show up every morning and they're just kind of guessing, trying to figure out what's working, what's not working. And, so that creates a bit of an issue right there. And so when you remove the dependency on word of mouth and referrals, and you break free from founder-led sales and get rid of all the guesswork, you begin to elevate yourself out of that founder's trap.
I can see that. And when you talk about escaping, for example, that founder-led sales, does it then come down to both building the system and hiring the right person to do it instead of the founder?
So you're right, but actually it goes even before that. See, and it's more in what's happening is it's getting more and more and more pronounced now than ever before. The buyers are researchers, uh, and they'll show up to the conversation already knowing to at some point whether or not they want to move forward or not. They have more information about you than oftentimes you know about yourself. They know about your competitors, they know about the alternatives, and so forth. And the data suggests anywhere from 70 to 96% of all the pre-sales activity, all the research is done before they get on the phone with you. And when you really look at the data, in 2019, the average person looked at 17 different sources of information before making a buying decision. In 2021, that went up to 27 different sources of information. And right now, we're looking at 36 different sources of information before they make a buying decision. So they're going through this cycle of exploration and evaluation and exploration and evaluation. And then they get on the phone with the salesperson. Where this is getting amplified now is what we call the AI distorted buyer's journey, or the AI disjointed buyer's journey. And the reason is if this is showing up more and more and more, and in 2026, this is really going to be elevated to the next level. Whereas if you look at your organic traffic between January and now, on average, companies have lost about 60% of all their organic traffic. It's gone down. Some are blaming the economy, some are blaming Donald Trump and politicians and everything else for that. But the reality is they didn't even realize it, but AI has already disrupted their business without them knowing. And that's because AI overviews have now taken a good chunk of the clicks, because AI overviews are providing information rather than driving clicks to the website. So buyers are becoming more and more and more educated. Inside of what we call setup has three functions: how to create, capture, nurture, demand. In that nurture demand side of things, we know that consumption drives conversion. The more content someone consumes, the more likely they are going to become a buyer. And so when you ask me that question, how do you fully remove people from the sales side? Right now, people are expecting the salespeople to do all the heavy lifting. In 2019, we had sales over here, we had marketing over here. In 2021, that overlapped to create this unified business development. By the year 2030, it's assumed that 100% of all buying decisions are going to end up happening as a rep-free sales experience without any need to get on the phone with the salesperson. So that nurturing part already, as it exists right now, in 2025, or depending on when this is published, 2026, it's still the same thing. That nurturing part is what's creating buyer-ready leads. As they go through this exploration and evaluation, by the time they get on the phone with you, they should be already knowing that they want to do business with you, but you're just qualifying them at this point. So escaping from founder-led sales, while you do want to make sure you have the sales playbook and so forth, at the same time, it's really less about sales. It's even more about marketing. There's a long-winded version for you. How's that sound?
That makes total sense. I mean, it's everything I've learned in marketing was it's all about generating more warm leads instead of cold leads. And warm leads is exactly that, where you've nurtured them through marketing so much that the call is just a few logistics and easily done. And that's why then the sales can be done through someone else, because they're already converted or they're already very interested. And so it's really just a few extra parts to be discussed on the call.
And you brought something up that I found was totally fascinating for me. So in business school, they would teach us about marketing and marketing. And then it dawned on me several years ago that nobody actually can do marketing. Nobody can do marketing. And I had the conversation with the CEO of a $500 million company. And he said to me, well, I do marketing. And I said, you can't do marketing. Nobody can do marketing. Marketing is like doing doctoring. And he looked at me and he's going, I am so confused. What are you talking about? I said, marketing is actually a function. It's a function of how you create demand, how you capture that demand, and then how you nurture that demand. So if you're listening and you want to know, well, how effective is my marketing? The question that I have for you is, how effective are you at capturing that demand? And that for that $500 million CEO, he looked at me like I was speaking a different language. He's like, I don't know. And so I said, all right, well, how effective are you at capturing that demand? He goes, oh, we generate thousands of leads per day, blah, blah, blah. Okay, all right, so you got it. What about nurturing that demand? How effective are you in your ability to nurture that demand? He goes, I don't know. So as we jumped on the phone to talk about marketing, yet 2/3 of your entire marketing function is operating in the dark. And now you're wondering why you're not getting the results that you should. And so and then obviously his mood changed and he goes, so what do I have to do? Should I fire everybody on my team? This is ridiculous. I don't, so, then we had to then, calm down a little bit, but that's true. People think I do marketing, but they do marketing by either throwing some money into SEO or throwing some money into pay-per-click or email marketing or outbound. And they think that they're doing marketing, but they're really doing a part of marketing, but it's really breaking it down into the functions of marketing to figure out how successful are they in each one of those functions. And then when you begin to realize that, everything starts to come together a little bit more, and marketing begins to produce for the first time.
So if you break down marketing into the core functions that you're talking about, you've mentioned capturing attention, you've mentioned nurturing. What would be the other core pillars to take into account?
So creating that demand. So if you think about creating that demand, that's at the very, very beginning. So much of that actually happens where it's at one point it was referred to as a dark social. There's just they're anonymous folks that go on. They're doing their research. They're looking at you. They're looking at the competition. Now what's happening, so there's a company, they do about $14 million a year, and I was coaching with them and I was showing them that you don't realize it, but even AI is competing with you right now. And I took them into the future, into one of those agentic browsers that will soon become the standard. And I took them into an agentic browser and I entered his core keywords into this agentic browser, and then AI started walking the user through how to doing it on their own without actually having to hire a company. And so, these are all the things that go on into that create demand type phase. So we know that familiarity helps to create trust. So familiarity also begins to create that demand. So there are ways like retargeting, for example, to be in front of somebody over and over and over and over and over again, right? Because in an ideal world, when it comes to, say, your business, right? In your world, you don't want people to have to go online and search for somebody like you. Ideally, you want people to search for Katie right off the bat, like boom, like search for you and search for your company. And that happens through that creating demand by just being everywhere, putting out content that solves the problem that they're actively searching for right now. And once they get enough content and they feel educated enough, then they're going to go from anonymous to then known. And that's when they go, okay, I'm going to fill out some information in order to either get this report or this assessment or whatever that might be. And that's the first time they actually become known. So even some simple things like posting on LinkedIn on a regular basis, that's a nice way to be able to capture demand. My clients, we have this board of directors program for our clients. We have a bunch of 6, 7, and 8-figure companies that come together. And when we talked about this concept, somebody said, I don't believe this is true. Now, this happened to be the #1 woman in the world in finance that actually happened to say this. I don't know that this is true. My buyer is different. And so I asked her, I go, can you just walk me through your process right before you became a client? Show me exactly what you did. And so she walked through and she goes, oh, but actually, I guess I did go to your LinkedIn. I said, okay, but let's talk about this a little bit. So you did go to my LinkedIn. And what did you do when you were there? Well, I looked at your profile and I guess I did read some of your posts. In fact, I remember exactly. I read 6 posts. For some reason that stands out. I read 6 posts. But how was I supposed to know this? Because you didn't connect with me. You didn't like any of my posts and you never commented. So how was I supposed to know this? She goes, like, I guess you wouldn't. So couldn't I come to the conclusion that my clients are different and it didn't work because you never engaged in my stuff? And she goes, huh, okay, all right, I see what you're doing. And then all of a sudden, then I opened it up and I asked the other people on the board, how many of you went through the same process? And almost everybody's hands went up. And I go, but why didn't I get this information? You connected after you became known, after you either going through the buying process or you became a client. So how was I supposed to know this? And they're like, no, that's a good point. Well, now this woman that I'm referring to is the number one in the world in finance. She is the most prolific person on LinkedIn that I know. She is, but it has done wonders for her and her company, because for the B2B buyer, so many of them are actually on LinkedIn, and it just helped to create that additional presence. But it's not just LinkedIn. There are so many different other ways. YouTube is gaining more and more importance, even in creating AEO, which is a fancy term for AI optimized content. When you're creating strong AEO content that the search engines begin to reference. And so when you're going to ChatGPT and you type in something and they're like, well, Katie talks about this and doing it this way, when you own that category, when you own that particular issue, that framework, now you're going to get credit for that. And again, that's going to still help you create more and more demand that way. So yeah, that's, I wish I could give you short and sweet answers, but the interesting thing about this is that, it's simple in concept, but the hip bone is connected to the knee bone, is connected to the thigh bone. Like there's so many different pieces that I feel if I just gave you one piece without painting the picture, that it's almost like baking a cake, but just forgetting to tell you about sugar or flour. Like there's so many things that have to go into it. Does that make sense?
It's a complex system, putting it all together. I mean, business and marketing in general. If we zoom out a bit, so you wrote this book, Predictable Profits, which is also your framework. And you explained that there are three core pillars: positioning, product, and promotion. And here we're talking a bit about promotion and generating demand. Obviously, product is its own category and always over-delivering to clients, for instance. But if we talk a bit about positioning, I know this is something a lot of founders or entrepreneurs struggle with when it comes to really niching down. How do you support founders when you realize that they have maybe a bit of a positioning issue? Maybe you could share some examples and how you help them to sort of niche down a bit more.
Sure. Well, there's several different ways in which you can create this unique advantage. We call it a unique advantage point. If you were to ask most people, so what makes you uniquely different from the competitors? You're going to hear things like, we care more, we offer better service, I make myself available, we're a family business, we've done this for 10, 20 years. And it's just, you hear a lot about this stuff. But it's like, if you didn't say any of that other stuff, like what really makes you unique? In other words, like, how is it possible that you can produce results that are so uncommon in the industry? Like, what actually is it about you and what you do? And that's where it becomes difficult. And again, this is where so much is dependent on the founder, because it's all based on founder experience. So part of creating that unique advantage point, there are several different elements. We call this the PCR method. The P part is the process. Like, what is that unique process, that unique framework, that unique something that only you can do? See, in products, right? Like in Founders Fuel here, in Founders Fuel, this is easy because we have a unique combination of ingredients that is manufactured through a patented manufacturing process. So with Founders Fuel, nobody else in the world can do this. It's easy for me to explain why Founders Fuel is the number one focus supplement in the world. However, for a service-based business, it becomes significantly more difficult because you can't touch it, you can't feel it, you can't taste it. So it's like, well, what is it? So when you create this process, we can say now here at Predictable Profits, to the best of my knowledge, we're the only company in the world that has created a framework for 6, 7, and 8-figure companies looking to create sustainable, predictable growth month after month, year after year. Other frameworks have been created, but they're by 9 and 10-figure companies and created by McKinsey and Bain and Deloitte and all those other companies, right? So we have a framework that's proprietary. So that's one. Like, what is your framework? What is unique to you? What is something only you can say you do? The next one is credibility. What is that credibility that you have that is, again, something that I could say that you have, that it stands you out so much, stands you out separately or distinctly from your competitors, right? When the International Business Times did a report and they called me the go-to business coach for 7 and 8-figure companies, That credibility from the International Business Times created so much for me, because at this point, as people are going through that cycle of exploration and evaluation, and they're like, wait a minute, I guess if the International Business Times says this, then like the guy must know something, right? So the credibility is also really nice, and all of that comes in the form of testimonials and some other things that can be said. And then the last one is results. And the results usually has to come down to like numbers, and that's case studies. Like, what can you say about the numbers that you produce? So that's that PCR method. But then there's that other element of niche that you talked about, right? And so everybody likes to think that their business is different and their business is unique and nobody else is like me, or my problem is unique, or whatever it is, right? So we're conditioned into saying, well, if you hone in into a particular if niche either to a problem or niche to an industry, then you're going to be the best, right? So you don't just have to niche to an industry. You don't have to just be like, I'm going to focus in on lawyers, as an example. You can, and that's awesome. Or you can niche to solve a very specific problem, whatever that might be. But the more specific you get and the finer that problem is, the more you're going to be seen as the expert to solve for that. And this is where we've seen some extraordinary growth. I mean, we had a client who came to us. They were doing about $950,000 a year. And he said, I've got clients from all over the place. I work with companies like Coca-Cola and Red Bull and blah, blah, blah. And then I also work with a bunch of different attorneys and so forth. And so he said, okay, let's look at this. And what we want to identify is your super consumer. Now, when I say super consumer, in business school, they teach you to have an ICP, or an ideal client profile. An ideal client profile is actually a theoretical representation of who you believe your best clients are going to be. And so you come up with what you want and what you believe your best clients are going to be. But then once you reach a certain level of success and enough data, now you actually know who your best clients are. These are the people that convert at the fastest amount. You produce the best results. They refer people. You have the highest margins. They stick around, less headache, less refunds, the whole deal. So you create this super consumer. And when you understand who that super consumer is, then you model everything over that business. We asked this client, so who's that super consumer that you have? And he determined it was personal injury attorneys. So we began to niche his business to personal injury. Now, if you ever want to scare a founder, tell the founder that they have to niche and say, and not market to all these other people and all these other companies, right? But what he was able to do was take his average, as a result of niching, he took his average initial purchase from, I think it was 5,000 or 5,500 up to 25,000, because he was very, very niched. His company grew from 950,000 to, I think it was 45 million within 5, 6 years, something like that. And now he's significantly bigger than that. And we're working to 100 million at this point. And so, but all of that had to do with, because he was so niched, people just defaulted to, he must know exactly what it is that needs to happen to get the results that we have. So niching is critical. It's one of those things that if you don't niche, you're going to dilute so much of your message, and it's going to become almost impossible for you to succeed in the new AI disjointed buyer's journey, because AI is going to turn around and they're going to say, okay, Katie, you're looking for a solution to this particular problem. Let me go out there and do the research for you. So they do the research, and they're going to say, first of all, based on all the information I already know about Katie, who do I believe is actually going to be able to help Katie the most? And they're going to look for specialists, because that's where they're going to get that sort of the confidence, right? So they're going to look for specialists, but they're going to look to see who has proprietary frameworks. They're going to look for the credibility. They're going to look for case studies and the results, and that helps to influence AI to come to you and say, Katie, here's the top 3 companies that we see that we're then going to recommend for you to take a look at. And then there you have it.
You mentioned AI several times. What do founders, entrepreneurs, business owners need to keep in mind coming ahead with your 2026? Like already in 2025, there were a lot of changes in businesses through AI. And I know we spoke a bit about it off air when you had me on your podcast. So what are some of the key things that they need to be on the lookout when it comes to AI?
We are about to see the biggest disruption in the history of business through AI. And this can be exciting for many, and it can be nerve wracking for some. Back in the day when the internet was created, it's, if you weren't on the internet, you had some time to actually get on the internet because it took a while for buying behaviors to change. We didn't have cell phones where you could just check any company you wanted on your cell phone. So it took a little while to get there. And so over time, people started to feel the pain. They put a website up, and so be it. It's there. Right now, though, that's different. Right now, if you don't know how to leverage this, the new buyer and new buyer's journey right now, if you can't take advantage of that, what's going to happen is you're going to fundamentally disappear, and your whole business will resort to just hard work, word of mouth, and referrals again. And so you're going to see a lot of companies shrinking in size because they just fundamentally disappeared. But then what you're also going to see is you're going to see like this K-shaped type of performance model. The people that are listening to this podcast and understand really what we're talking about right now and start to take advantage of it, they're going to be in this position where there is more opportunity than they have ever seen, ever before in the history of their business, because all the competitors sort of faded out and disappeared. You're starting to shine. And at this point, it's like your biggest issue is going to be scaling fast enough. And so AI, where we've started to see it with AI overviews, a 60% reduction in traffic between January and where it stands right now organically. What many people don't realize is that in some cases, in fact, the other day when I was doing a demonstration and speaking with a bunch of different business owners, my default browser turned into AI mode on Chrome. My Google default went to AI mode. And so it was perfect because as we went to show them through the AI mode what happened and how they showed up based on the keywords that they relied on and so much, they realized that they weren't there. Many people aren't using Atlas or know what Atlas is. Atlas is ChatGPT's agentic browser that just came out. So you can actually, I think it's only available on Mac as I recall, but you can actually use a ChatGPT browser called Atlas. It is phenomenal. It's really, really good when you understand the power behind it. But then it's helping you further and further and further make educated buying decisions. And so now, whereas before you would either work with the decision maker or you had a committee that helped to influence these type of decisions, now you're actually have to add one more element into that, and that's AI. That's really going to influence those decisions. We also have to understand, when you and I started this podcast, I said that 100% of all buying decisions are going to happen from a rep-free sales experience by the year 2030. Now, this is something that I started talking about 2 years ago, that I believed that this was actually going to happen. And then I had to give a presentation several weeks ago in West Palm Beach, Florida. And I knew, because of the caliber of the people in the room, that they were going to question me and they were going to then doubt whether or not that was going to be true. So I had to find data to back this up. Well, coincidentally, McKinsey did a report, and they believe that this is also going to be the case for even services that are $1 million and more. People will have no problem on a rep-free sales experience. You look at Forrester. Forrester did another report, and they said, even for services $500,000 and more, a rep-free type of sales experience. But this shouldn't come as a surprise. Over in Palm Beach, there used to be a Tesla dealership, and as I've been told, Elon Musk closed the Tesla dealership in Palm Beach because people just wanted to buy on their phone. They just wanted to buy a six-figure Tesla on their phone. They didn't have the need to go into a dealership. They just wanted to do it rep-free. Carvana has done that quite a bit here in the United States, where you can turn around, you can order a car online, they'll ship it to the house, they'll even take your vehicle, trade it in, and then, take off and do it that way. So there's already these rep-free sales experiences that are already beginning to happen. And we're going to see more and more and more of that through AI. And it's just something that we have to prepare for and we have to adapt. But if you do adapt, then you're going to have an opportunity like you have never, ever, ever had before, which in many ways, I could argue it's one of the most exciting times for a founder to be in business. So it's good. It's exciting.
It's so wonderful to discuss this with someone who's so obviously in the know-how of what things are going to look like, because I think over the last few years with the development of AI, there were a lot of theories and ideas, but you've looked into this so in depth, and through the clarity of the way you express it, it really sounds like, okay, this is how it's going to happen. So how do we best prepare to follow Charles' input on this? This really
Well,
came through.
it is fun. It is a good time. And I think you and I kind of think a lot alike because we talked about this in this other podcast that where I had you on my podcast. Um, but the one important thing is that Tony Robbins, who I traveled with, as you and I talked about earlier, he likes to say where attention goes, energy flows. And I really didn't understand the depth of what he meant by that until years later as I was growing my companies and whatnot. And where you focus your attention, you begin to start seeing things that are going to support what you believe to be true. So if you're of the mindset that AI is evil and AI is going to hurt your business, you're going to see all the reasons why AI is going to harm your business. And it's only going to take you down this deep, dark path that will lead to the ultimate just demise of your business. But if you change that mindset and you go, you know what? How can AI be the best thing in the world to happen to me and my company right now? Then you're going to see all the opportunities and possibilities for you in leveraging AI that's going to give you an advantage over your other competitors in the market. And so keeping that mindset is, even if it feels overwhelming and a little bit scary, but keeping that mindset like, okay, well, how can this be one of the best times in the world for me to be in business? And how can I leverage this stuff right now? And you're going to start seeing things that you otherwise wouldn't have seen before, that your competitors have completely overlooked. And because the vast majority of the people aren't having the conversations that we're having right now, I'm talking like 99.99999%, right? They're not having these conversations. You don't actually have to be a master at this. Katie, have you ever heard the saying, how do you ensure that you don't get eaten by a bear? You know what the answer? How do you make sure you don't get eaten by a bear? You just make sure that you're faster than your friend, right? You just make sure you're faster than your friend, right? You can run faster than your friends because nobody really knows how to do this or take advantage of it. You don't have to be a Jedi master in AI. You just have to be a little bit faster or a little bit better than your competition. And the bar is not high right now. The bar is actually quite low. You just have to be a little bit better. And just by being that little bit better, you're going to have a massive, massive advantage. So while we're talking a lot and it can seem, somewhat overwhelming to some people, the reality is you just have to be a little bit better, just a little bit better. And that can provide you with a huge advantage.
And I love what you said about that mindset, where attention goes, energy flows, and what you focus on amplifies. And if you focus on the downside or the scarcity or the problems or the economy, you'll start to spiral in that negative. But if you focus on abundance, you spiral the other way. And a lot of the work I've done with business owners and entrepreneurs has been to support them to go from this scarcity where we're focusing on all the problems to this abundance and we're seeing all the opportunities. And this is exactly what you're talking about with AI. So just to sort of wrap up today's episode, I know you referred to, again, to Tony Robbins' quote, success leaves clues. And part of your whole framework on predictable profits is to support business owners to be successful and to achieve that higher level of success. what is one topic that we haven't discussed today that you think needs to be added to complete our conversation on marketing, niching down, attracting attention, demand, and AI? What would be a nice one to add to support business owners to have more predictable profits in 2026?
Wow, what a really, really great question. Um, so I've learned over the years that um, taking imperfect action consistently over and over and over again will outperform a perfect strategy that just takes forever to then execute, right? So I guess if there's one thing that I would say is don't wait until you feel like you know enough information. Um, don't try to make things perfect. Just start by taking action, observe that action to see what's working and what's not working, and then really, really pay attention and do more of what it is that is working, and either change, optimize, or remove the stuff that's not working, and just continue to take one step in front of the other and one step in front of the other. Businesses don't die because of the lack of a good idea. They actually die because of a lack of momentum. And so your job right now is to create as much momentum as you can. And the way that you create that momentum is by taking an action and repeating it consistently, day after day, week after week, and just continuing to do that. If you want to multiply that momentum, bring other people on your team together, focused in on a very similar objective, and get more and more people rowing in the same direction. And that begins to amplify that momentum more and more and more again. And you'll see that what seems hard today, you keep doing this a month from now, all of a sudden it's now easy. And you're going to push yourself and take on a bigger challenge. But this isn't something that I made up. Richard Branson actually said that if you know how to leverage momentum, you'll leave your competitors trailing in your wake. So the question that I would have for everybody and what I'll leave people with right now is, how can you create more momentum in your business in order to continue to optimize, succeed, and create even more momentum on top of that?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Charles. This has been such a joy. You've shared so many gold, and I'll be so many gold nuggets, and I'll be listening to it over and over again to also refresh myself on these core topics, because a lot of what you shared is really everlasting. Some of it is more topical with AI, but some of it is everlasting when it comes to marketing and sales and the way you show up and the mindset and that momentum. So key, so essential. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Together we're better. Well, thank you.
Thank you.